Now, if you're not very flexible, this video is for you. I'm going to go through some tips or tricks to give us some head to toe mobility that's going to be useful for whatever we want to do. Whether it's playing with the kids, playing sport, doing a handstand, or just staying healthy, there's a certain amount of mobility that we need. And unfortunately, a lot of us lack the ranges of motion to do the things that we want to do, whether it's simply getting something from an overhead cupboard, putting hard shoes on, or even having the ability to sit comfortably on the floor. Now, the body is amazing and it's very good at compensating. Now, the compensations can be good, so it allows us to do things, but what it can do is it can make us overuse certain areas of the body that can cause aches or pains or worse, injuries, or we might just be inefficient at doing what we want to do. So let's jump in initially with a few assessments to see what we can and can't do. And I'd highly recommend you video yourself from the side to see what you're actually doing at the moment. So let's just start with standing like this. So I'm going to stand feet shoulder width apart. I'm going to lock the knees backwards or just have them fully extended. And then I'm just going to try and roll down through the spine. So I'm going to go chin to chest first. Then we're going to try and round through my upper back, then my mid back, then my low back. And then I'm just going to see how far I can go down on the forward fold. Now, because of my love for handstands and calisthenics, I have increased my flexibility a lot, but I'm actually naturally unflexible or tight. And we'll come into that in a second. There is a quick test you can see to see whether you're naturally flexible or naturally tight. But initially, just have a look at that test that you just done. We're going to see how your body rolls. So what does your spine look like when you go down? Ideally, we should see articulation. So each part of the spine moves one by one as we round. But in reality, you're going to find that you're going to be more like this, and you're going to have chunks of segments of your spine that move together. It's going to create hinges or rounding of the spine where you compensate. So now we've got an idea or a picture of how your spine moves, and also what does your forward fold look like. You can even try and touch your toes. So you've got some sort of indicator in terms of range of motion. The other one we want to look at now is more the front of the body and see how our quads and hip flexors act. So the muscles on the front of our body. And for this one, we want to have some kind of cushion so we can put our knee onto it, because we're just going to go into a lunge position. So a lunge there at 90 degrees at the front knee, 90 degrees at the back knee, and then a nice upright torso. So we're looking to see whether we've got a straight line from our shoulder down to our knee. Someone who's tight in the hip flexors and quads here, they might find that they go into this position and they actually can't open the hip up there. We want to feel that we can get the glutes and the abs on a little bit. It creates that straight line. And then for the test, we want to see if we can lean forward so we don't get cramps in our hamstring. And then I'm going to grab hold of the foot, and then I can come back up to that position. Now, can I pull my heel to my butt and still have a fully open line from that knee to the shoulder? That's quite challenging to do, but it's going to give us an idea of what the front of the body is like. Then obviously we want to do exactly the same thing for the opposite side. Go to that lunge position again, have open hip, see how that looks, and then see if you can lift the foot up, bringing the heel towards the butt, making sure you've still got that open hip position. Then we want to jump down onto the floor, have a seat in this position, so like a pike position there. So my legs are out in front of me, and I'm just seeing if I can sit upright with my torso, like so. So if you are tight in the calves, hamstrings, and the spine here, you might look a bit like this and actually feel like you're going to fall backwards. But just see if you can sit upright. Again, take pictures, take video, so you can see what you actually look like instead of what you think you look like. Similar to that, let's just stand with the knees locked backwards, keeping the spine straight now from the hip all the way to the head. I'm just going to go down as far as I can, trying to keep an arch in my low back. See how far I can go down, keeping the knees locked backwards, keeping that flat low back. Again, video from the side. Ideally here, we want to be parallel to the floor at least, or have a flat low back in that position and be able to come back up again. And then the last one, can we take our hands above our head? So I'm going to go shoulder width. I'm going to stand with straight legs. I'm going to keep more of a neutral pelvis position. And I'm just going to see with straight arms, kind of take my biceps up by my ears and lift my hands as high as I can in that position. Now, ideally, all of those positions should be quite comfortable and we should feel like we've got good ranges. In reality, we're going to be tight in certain ones, and I'm going to go through some stretches and exercises to improve those movements today. And nice and simple, you just need to focus on the ones that you struggle with, especially if it's associated with pain or compensation in the body. Number one, let's look at the spine. Ideally, we should be able to articulate and round and move each segment one by one. Now, I'd highly recommend that all of you are doing some sort of hanging. So ideally, hands shoulder width apart, hanging here passively. So making the body as long as possible, as long as you don't have pain, and holding there for around 60 seconds. That's a nice simple way to lengthen the whole body line, especially around the spine, the shoulders, and that overhead position. But there's a couple other things we can do around the spine that's going to help our mobility. But a great exercise is up against the wall, and this is going to help us increase our mobility of our spine and our awareness of how to move it. So I'm going to go about a foot away from the wall. I'm going to bend the knees slightly. I'm going to put everything against the wall. Now, if I just put my back against the wall, my head against the wall, I'm going to have a natural gap in my low back. That's going to be slightly different for everyone, depending on how much of a pelvic tilt you have. But first of all, we're just going to push our low back to the wall. So to do this, I'm going to turn my abs and my glutes on a little bit, push my low back to the wall, and that's going to tip my pelvis backwards into a posterior position. Then I'm going to do the opposite and go into an anterior position, so increase the gap in the low back. Now I'm just going to go back into that posterior position, but now I'm going to keep the back pushed in. So the low back is pushed against the wall now. Now I'm going to keep rolling, so my butt comes off the wall, but my low back's still against the wall. And then I'm going to keep rolling bit by bit off the wall until I get up onto my shoulders. Then I'm going to push up onto my head in that position. Now the back down, or the way back down, is much more challenging because I need to try and lay each segment down. So upper back, now mid back. Now the hard one is low back to get there before butt, all while I'm maintaining my head position on the wall, low back, then butt. Then I'm going to go to anterior position, let the low back come off, and then roll it back off again. Now, in time, with a little bit of practice, you're going to increase your ability to roll off segment by segment, and you can actually go quite quick with this. But to start with, we want to go slow and just really work on that rolling off the wall and rolling back on again. This one's really nice because it's not tied in with the hamstrings. It's a bit more isolated. When we do a forward fold and we're trying to roll down, if our hamstrings are tight, that's going to really dictate how our spine moves. This one, we just got the knees bent a little bit. We keep them bent and we can just focus just on the spine moving and that articulation. You can do that same movement on the floor, but I prefer it against the wall, and it's a little bit easier to get that feedback, and you can actually get a bit higher up and go right up onto your head, which you can't do on the floor. Now, talking about compensation and using the hamstrings, now another one we might need to isolate, but in the opposite direction. So when we was doing the one up against the wall, we was talking about isolating the spine and not getting the hamstrings involved. Exactly the same, but the other way around is trying to work the hamstring and the calf mobility without the spine compensating too much. So when we forward fold, a lot of the time it's the spine that takes the load if we don't have the hamstring and calf flexibility. So we might need to isolate the hamstrings and calf first, lengthen those so then they can spine and the hamstrings can eventually work together without overcompensating for each other. Now, the simplest way to isolate the hamstring is to put your foot up onto something. I'm a big fan of using a box like this because it's got 3 different heights. I can just turn it over, but you can put your foot up on a chair, the couch, the bed, anything. So I'm just going to place the foot up here and I'm going to lock the knee backwards. Now that might be enough for you to feel the hamstrings. Now we want to feel there that the hamstring is doing the work here and that's getting the stretch, and that we're not in this position. If we feel like we're in this position and the back is taking the load still, we need to isolate it even more. And the easiest way to isolate the hamstring even more is to lay down on the floor and use a doorway. So if you imagine the doorway is there, and I'm going to have this foot through the door and then this one up on the edge of the door frame, like so. This wall works really well because it's got a bit that juts out. But we want to make sure that this leg is straight. That's why we can't use the corner of a wall. And then I'm going to lay down in that position. Now I can lay here quite comfortably. My hamstrings are quite long now, so I can get away with this. But if you look like this and the hamstring is making the butt lift off the floor, then I'm too close to the wall. So I want to walk back a little bit or move back a little bit further. So I might go in that position. Now both butt cheeks on the floor, the knees locked backwards. I can feel the hamstring, I can feel the calf, and I can just lay there for time. Now the beauty of this one is the back is staying neutral and I'm not compensating in any way. I can make this fun as well. I could put a towel around the foot, hold on to that, and that's going to include the calf in the stretch. Again, I just want to make sure that the head is resting on the floor and I'm not rounding up in this position. I want to feel that the spine is relaxed. I'm just isolating the calf and hamstring. And then as I get more flexible, I can just move closer and closer to the wall. But as soon as I get to the point where this is more or less at 90 degrees, I can go up to that box version, or I can do a floor version, which is lunge, lock the knee backwards, and then just start to take fingers towards the floor. But you'll find if you don't have the flexibility, you'll be in this position and it'll be really hard to straighten this leg and you'll be compensating through the spine. And that's when you'll need to use the wall version to build up to that one. Then going back to overhead mobility, again, I'm going to use the box, but you could use a chair. And we're going to work that overhead mobility by going into a 90-degree position at the hip and the knees. Now, if you need to, you can put a pad or a mat underneath the knees. I'm going to place the hands on the box shoulder width apart. I'm going to make sure the arms are nice and straight. I'm making sure the toes are pushed into the floor. That's actually really important. If I lift the toes up and do this exercise, I'll tend to dump into my low back. So keep that position so your toes are pushed down to the floor. Keep the arms locked out, hands at shoulder width apart. And then I'm just going to slowly take my shoulders down or open my chest towards the floor and come into that position. Now we need to be aware here where you're feeling the stretch. If you're someone that has a low back that likes to compensate and likes to go into an arch, then you have to really consciously go into a posterior tilt. So tuck that pelvis underneath as you move the hands, as you move the shoulders down. So posterior tilt and then come into it. If you're like me and your low back doesn't like to arch, you actually don't need to worry about that too much and you'll just feel it in the upper back and shoulders. But this one's a really nice stretch to open up the upper body. So we've looked at our hamstrings, we've looked at our spinal mobility, we've looked at our overhead position. Next, let's look at those quads and hip flexors, that lunge position we were talking about if you can't get your heel towards your butt. And this is where you can set something up like this. Now this mat works really well because I can elevate the back section and I still have a pad for the knee. So I can go into that lunge position and look, we're back into that position again, trying to get the knee to the shoulder to be a straight line. But as I raise the foot up, it's going to get harder and harder. So if I can't get into this position, I need to slowly increase the height of the foot. And that's why I use something behind me. So I can use a mat like this and pile it up. I can go into more of a flex position with the ankle, so that raises that up. Or if I'm somewhere in between this position and this position, I can go up against the wall or the box like this, and then I can just slowly, making sure I've got the line from the knee to the shoulder, closer and closer to the box until I can get all the way up into that position. Now the box here isn't working very well because it's actually moving backwards with the tension that I'm creating. But use that as your reference point, making sure this is open and that you're not doing this. Because this isn't stretching this muscle because I'm compensating and closing the hip. I need to make sure that I'm fully open in there. And then the last piece of the puzzle that we're going to look at today is the glutes, the pigeon stretch that's commonly known. And you'll see a lot of people doing it this way, where they come on the floor and come into this position and do a pigeon stretch like that. Now the downside of doing the pigeon stretch there is the back hip flexor. So this quad here and this hip flexor is hindering me going down unless you've got good range there. So the floor actually gets in the way and then you do lots of compensation. So a good way to work that without this back leg getting in the way is to use the box, the chair, or the sofa again. And now I'm going to go into the position like so. But this back leg's not in the way now because it's straight down. And then I can focus on trying to bring the knee down towards the box and be in that position. Now, if that's too hard, I can bring this foot back towards me. It makes it much, much easier. Just make sure that that's not a compensation and it's just a way you're making it slightly easier. Or I can raise the knee up slightly. Now, you might need to do that if you are quite tight here. And again, a mat like this works well because we can set it up something like this there. So if I put my foot there, my knee there, now my knee is higher than my foot, but I'm getting a good stretch. And then as I go, I can just slowly reduce this until I find a comfortable position or work down to that position where the knee is eventually in line with the foot. I can work it square and everything off and then just hold that position. So that's going to isolate that pigeon pose stretch position that gets into the glutes. And that combined with the hamstring Lengthening the spinal mobility is going to give you that seated position on the floor. Now remember, this is very specific to where you're tight. Most people are either tight in the hamstrings or tight in the hip flexors, especially when it's postural tightness. So it's habits, it's positions they work in, positions they sit in that creates that tightness, and they need to open that up more than some of the other positions. So that's going to be very down to the individual. However, whether you're hypermobile or immobile is a big factor to that. So let's just quickly do a test that's going to tell us that information. So if you just hold your hand up like that and try and pull your little finger down, see if you can get your finger to go 90 degrees. I can't do it. See, my little finger there doesn't move. If your finger goes 90 degrees, so this way, and you can also then get your thumb either to touch there or very, very close. And when you take your elbows like this, your elbows hyperextend, so your elbow comes up high, so mine doesn't come up high, then that's going to tell you you're more hypermobile. That means you're going to dump into your joints a little bit more. You can still be posturally tight, but your body is going to be affected or changed differently than the person like me who has to really work their mobility all the time because they're everywhere wants to be tight in their body and they're more likely to dump into their muscles. Either way, you need to be working towards your strengths and weaknesses. When it comes to flexibility and mobility, I'm a big believer of visiting positions, so not be too intense with your stretching, but to visit and stretch and just hang out in positions as much as possible. In terms of reps, sets, and time, if you're going through what we went through today, I'll be working around 30 to 60 seconds in each position. For one set of everything, if you're doing a bit of everything, slowly increasing that to 2 or 3, or if you're trying to be specific on a certain area, do 2 or 3 sets of the same stretches and maybe superset 2 together. So you could do a hang and a hamstring stretch. So you're not resting in between, or put it in with your strength training or your handstands or whatever you're training. Reach out if you'd like more help with your training. I have my app and my online coaching. Details are all down below on my website, and I'll speak to you guys in the next one.